Chapter 1. The Dark Pit. Lance. From the moment I separated my eyelashes, my small egg of a brain was empty, and I could not think. With a single blink and more, thousands of questions started streaming into my head like river water flowing into a dam. The major and headache-causing question was, where was I actually? All around me I could see only pitch black. Had I become blind? I started shouting, but only my echoes were replying to me. What had I really gotten into? I looked up and saw a small portion of sunlight through a little hole. The small hole started to expand till light could fill quarter of the room. I could now actually see the small red ball up in the sky. Suddenly, the light was blocked by something which looked like a head. It was a human, familiar. He looked down to where I was and called out my name. I heard two different sounds at the same time. I heard a voice of someone, which was familiar to my brothers, but towards the end of the call, the room was now filled with echoes of the call and those of a hissing sound. I could not fully conclude the person calling me was my brother yet. I had to shakingly wait for a second call. A hissing sound struck my ears first, which left me looking in all directions. I was trying to identify the source of this fierce sound. I got more curious when I realized there was nothing on the spot where the rays of light from the sun were shining. When the long-awaited sound finally got into my ears, I quickly replied. This was my brother. He began stretching a rope along the wall, down towards where I was. I realized I was in a sort of pit. Jason told me to get hold of the rope. Unfortunately, he had laid the rope on the dark side of the pit's wall, where there was absence of light and where I was. He had done this for my own benefit, but it turned out to be a disadvantage to both of us. I couldn't identify my roommate on this dark side, so I told him to shift the position of the rope. It would be better if he put it on the other side where there was light. He pulled the long rope out of the pit. I looked up in the sky and saw clouds now drifting towards the sun. The weather was quickly changing. As Jason began stretching the rope again on the other side, the light faded away. It had been blocked by the clouds. Now, there was nothing to do except going for the rope. Staying in that pit for a while was going to be one of the worst. I ran towards the wall where the rope was lying. As I raised my hand to catch the rope, the old hissing sound, which I had seemed to forget, entered in waves into my precious ears, louder this time. A snake should have been nearby. This meant it had shifted its prior position because the last time I had checked for the clarity of this position, when the clouds had not yet swallowed the light, I had found nothing. I blindly touched several parts of the wall, searching for the rope. The rapid hand movement was all because of fear of the unknown position of the snake. My hand got into contact with something which seemed to be a rope, and I kept holding it. It started moving. Was Jason waging the rope? I shouted, ordering him to stop, but he reacted unexpectedly. Stop what? I ain't moving anything. He said. I felt two pointed teeth dipping into my flesh. My hand had been bitten by the snake. I managed to sustain my usual loud cry as this would bring no clue. I pushed the snake sideways as I still held it, and I heard it landing at a distance far away. By the little sound I had received due to its contact with the ground, I could tell it was not such a big snake. Quickly, I looked for the real rope with one hand as the other one got helpless. I didn't want to be bitten by the rival for the second time. I got hold of something, which I was sure was a rope this time. I pulled it downwards and felt the tension in it, absolutely confirming it was a rope with a fixed end. I tied it around my arm and was good to go. Jason pulled me up and I was getting out of the pit slowly, with the help of my legs. My workouts were now playing their part. I finally reached the top and threw myself on the ground as a lot of my energy had been lost. Looking on my left hand, I suddenly saw two tiny holes vomiting some blood at a slow rate. My blood had already covered some parts of my hand, the bottom of my shirt and a few spots at the top of my trousers. I was lying on the ground on this blood-covered side, and my brother who was standing could only see the positive side. "Hello, Lance," said Jason. I didn't even know when he started calling me as I was in shock and still trying to get my memory back. "Oh, sorry for the delay, but where are we exactly?" "I don't know either. But we must find a way out of this place," I said, shifting to a sitting position on the ground. That is when Jason saw my blood outside, on my body. He raised his hand and ran his fingers through his afro, started to crack his head when I told him some snake had bitten me on my hand. This is what he always did when out of options, implying I had to make a quick decision for my own health here. I took off my right leg shoe and socks, tied the socks on the spot where the tiny holes had settled to help the blood near exit clot and keep the other blood inside. I then untied a shoelace from the same shoe and tied it around the bitten arm. This would reduce the speed of the poison's travel on its way to the central nervous system of my body. I then put the shoe back on my right foot. Jason just looked at what I was doing, taking me for an uneducated fool. The only thing I remembered at this moment, before teleporting into that pit, was that I had been on a bus to Santal, with my brother seated next to me. We had gotten off the bus at the bus station of the town, walked a little while, but I had no idea what had happened afterwards. We were now trapped in a jungle with no sign of human life except the two of us. I had to quickly visit a medical center as the poison would still make a way along my veins and arteries with the blood. Squeezing my hands into my pockets, I only came out with hands. I thought I would find a cell phone and make a call. "Come on, let's go," said Jason as he lifted me up. He hung my hand around his neck, and we began wandering about in the forest. We pushed through several tall grasses in search of a road. The walk was uncomfortable. For each and every step, I felt my consciousness decreasing. My legs became heavy as my pace shortened and slowed down. The clouds now moved away from the sun's rays path, which permitted the rays to scorch on us, adding more to challenges I was facing here. My bottom eyelash seemed to be a magnet as it attracted the one at the top. I would continuously oppose this action each and every time as it happened involuntarily. I felt the world shaking in all directions. This dizzy intensified, and it halted my walk. I fell onto the ground, fainted. The next moment I woke up in a hospital bed. 6 eyes were fixed on mine. The owner of the first pair told me to calm down. That is when the sound from the heartbeat machine, which signified my heartbeat, began to get less louder, meaning I had complied. Of the 3 nurses who were gazing down at me, one gave it a stop and exited the ward. The other 2 kept looking as if they were dolls, which made me doubt the moment's reality. They seemed to be daring me to make a move for an unpleasing price, so I kept glued to the bed. After a couple of seconds, Jason entered the room. The remaining nurses retired on guard as Jason came closer. This made me happy. At least a human finally came. My brother started to explain everything that he had gone through during the period I was unconscious. "Together with the driver, we carried you into the vehicle, and he drove us here, where I had to wait for half an hour till you got attended," concluded Jason, who seemed to be tired now. I appreciated him as he had done a lot. I just imagined him carrying me on his shoulders, wandering about in the forest, periodically resting till he found a narrow dust path, and possibly, after some time, found transport which he had long waited for, moving in tortoise speed and rather seeming to be motionless. What a lot. All I had done was just faint. We were now at a hospital in remote areas of Santal, where we had been dumped. The nurses said I had to be admitted at the hospital and maybe spend some nights there. This was the last thing I wanted. What type of food were they going to feed me with in this old rural hospital? I didn't like the sound of this. I told Jason to be honest with him. I just felt like I would fully recover soon, and I needed a proper rest at home in the comfort of my bed. Jason understood my issue. We then made a deal. He walked to the door of the ward that was in accordance to our plan to check if there were any nurses nearby from outside the ward. He then looked back at me, raising his thumb, indicating the coast was clear. I put my blankets away, got off the bed and went towards the door where Jason was standing. The patients in the ward just looked at me with surprise as I tiptoed away. They found it pointless to say a word to me as I performed my mischief. Jason checked the passage for the second time and with me this time to confirm there was no one who would send me back to my bed. When we realized the passage was only on its own, we took a silent sprint, with our knees reaching their highest position, so that we would reach the far end in the shortest possible time, before anyone could catch us red-handed. This turned out to be a success. I had gained some energy due to the injections the nurses had dripped into my body. The poison had been absorbed by a black charcoal that was placed on top of the tiny holes, which was truly a rural means of healing. The item had fallen off on the ground during our sprint. I didn't even care if there was some poison left in my blood that was yet to be absorbed. I was just feeling 100% healthy. We exited the hospital, jumped an old 1-meter fence that marked the hospital's boundaries and ran away. Later, we stopped running when we realized no one was even following, nor could catch up with us. We started walking to Santal town, which took us an hour to complete the 2-kilometer journey. As we reached there, our stomachs were now roaring with hunger. We passed a restaurant on our way to the bus stop of the town. The smell of food reached my nostrils, and suddenly saliva gathered all around my mouth. Jason placed his hands into his pockets, hoping to come out with money, but discovered there was none. I began laughing at him and he got angry. Our $500 had gone. Whoever kidnapped us must have taken our money as well. As there was no money, we had to tense the extreme hunger, and we boarded a bus to our home situated in the town of OTEL.